ninth episode of Talkin Tar Heels starts right now. Hello, everybody. Welcome in to another episode of Talkin Tar Heels. Sorry we were out for so long, and this is obviously not the normal Saturday episode you guys may have been expecting, but because of the unique circumstances with the Minnesota game occurring in the middle of the week and on a Thursday night, I wanted to drop a preview for this, and I didn't want to drop it last Saturday as stuff may change in between Saturday and the time that I'm recording this now. So we're gonna drop a Tuesday edition of the show. So this is how this preview edition is going to work. We're gonna look at the matchup. Then we're gonna look at the quarterback matchup. We're gonna take a quick look at some impact players and then look at our keys to the game before wrapping it up with our final thoughts and prediction. That is how this is going to go. So, first, let's take a look at the matchup. North Carolina taking on Minnesota on the road this Thursday, August 29th, 8 p.m. The game is going to be nationally televised on Fox. Last year's season stats for these two teams: North Carolina averaged 34.5 offensive points per game. They had 491 yards per game. They gave up 23.3 points per game on defense and gave up 4 yards per game on defense as well. For Minnesota, they were a struggling offense last year. They only averaged just south of 21 points per game at 20.9 points per game. They had 301 yards per game, 26.7 points per game allowed, and 368 yards per game allowed. Minnesota, however, was 500 last year, and that may come as a surprise to a few people who just heard me mention those stats. But then again, you never know in college football. In terms of the preseason polls, what the media thinks of these two teams: North Carolina has been picked 8th in the preseason poll, while Minnesota has been picked 12th in the Big Ten poll. The quarterback matchup, we'll move on and start talking about quarterbacks. And obviously, I've had an episode where I talked about Max Johnson, Connor Harrell, that quarterback battle. However, Mac Brown has released some new information since the last time that I recorded. When he met with the media a couple days ago, he said that both quarterbacks could play in this game. Now, this could just be an attempt to throw Minnesota off guard, keep them guessing. You know, they will have to prepare for both quarterbacks and two completely different quarterback styles. Max Johnson's a left-handed pocket passer. Connor Harrell is a right-handed scrambler. So, whether he's trying to throw Minnesota off guard or telling the truth, it's going to make for a very interesting game. I do believe that we will in fact see both quarterbacks, and whether or not he subs them play by play or lets them lead a drive, I do feel like this game could be very indicative of how the season goes. And whichever quarterback does the best in this game, I do feel like has the best chance to keep the job for the remainder of the season. When it comes to Minnesota, their starting quarterback is going to be Max Brosmer, and he has made 36 starts. He threw for over 8,000 yards with a 62% completion percentage, a 68 to 25 touchdown to interception ratio in 5 years at FCS school, New Hampshire. That's the quarterback matchup. A quick look at at a note in terms of starters returning for Minnesota. They returned 7 starters on offense and 8 on the defense, while Carolina returns 5 offensive starters and 7 defensive starters. I am not accounting for starters at other teams that have transferred into the schools. So in some preseason magazines, you may see a little bit higher numbers on both these teams. In terms of my impact players for this game, for North Carolina, on the offensive side, it's obviously got to be running back Omarion Hampton. I feel like he is obviously a Doak Walker Award candidate, and I feel like he has a chance, if Carolina is good, to be a Heisman candidate. Last year, he had 253 carries for over 1,500 yards, 15 touchdowns on a 5.9 yard per carry average. On the defensive side for Carolina, my impact player is going to be linebacker Power Echols. Obviously, there's a leadership void to fill with Cedric Gray. I feel like Power Echols will be able to do that. Last year, he had 102 tackles with 5.5 tackles for loss and an interception. Turning to the Minnesota Golden Gophers, we look at on the offensive side of the ball for them, running back Darius Taylor. It's going to be a matchup of two very solid running backs. Now, Minnesota has a couple of running backs that they kind of rotated in last year, kind of running back by committee. But this guy led their backfield last year with 138 carries, 799 yards, 5 touchdowns on 5.8 yards per carry. On the defensive side of the ball, it's got to be nickelback Jack Henderson. He's the leading returning tackler for Minnesota. He had 59 tackles last year, 4 tackles for loss, 2 picks. He is a key member of that defense. Now, the key matchup in this game, and this can be units or players, and I'm going with the North Carolina offensive line versus the Minnesota front seven. It's been well documented how Carolina has remade that offensive line with several transfers. They do still have holdover Willie Lampkin, but they get their first real test against a Minnesota front seven that is very experienced, very talented. They return a lot of production from last year. So how North Carolina's O-line responds to this challenge could dictate a large part how this game goes. I feel like, and we'll talk about this just a tiny bit later, this game is going to be won in the trenches. And now let's turn to keys to the game. For North Carolina, my first key to the game for them is got to be to pound the rock. Carolina has a star running back, and they need to use him. Even though there's a new O line, the rebuilt O line, they should still be able to clear up enough holes. And Hampton is talented enough to find those holes. So Carolina needs to pound the rock, especially with the new QB still probably learning the ropes. Whoever it is, or whether or not it's both quarterbacks, there's a good chance they may not have a full grip of the offense. There's obviously going to be some pregame jitters. Hampton's got the experience to not have those, and I feel like Hampton is going to be a key part of this game. If he has over 150 yards in this game, I feel like Carolina wins easily. And then on the defensive side of the ball, I have a key for each side of the ball for Carolina. They've got to stop the run. Minnesota has, like I mentioned, a solid running back duo. They have a veteran offensive line. Carolina has to control the line of scrimmage, limit chunk plays on the ground to have a shot in this game. And as both of these keys kind of overlap with one big key to the game, and that is control the trenches. And that's got to be Carolina's focus in this game. Obviously with the remade O-line, but the defensive line and front seven is very talented for Carolina, very experienced. They've got several returning starters on that defensive line. So it is not out of the question for Carolina to be able to control the line of scrimmage in this game. And I feel like if they do so, they've got a good shot to win this game, and they should, in fact, win this ball game if they are able to. A final stat before we wrap this preview show up. At the time of recording this video, North Carolina has a 54.5% chance to win the game, according to ESPN Analytics. Now let's turn to our final thoughts and my prediction for the game. And I've documented it earlier in this episode. Carolina must win the battle in the trenches. It cannot be understated. This is a battle of experienced defensive lines versus one experienced O-line in Minnesota's and a not so experienced O-line in terms of actually working together in Carolina's. So if Carolina is able to pull off the battle in the trenches, they should be able to win this game. This does feel like a gritty game, though. Like I said, trenches. We're going to see a lot of just smash mouth football. And it feels like a game that's probably going to be in the 20s. A lot of ball control. Carolina's going to be running the football a lot. I feel like Minnesota's going to be running the football a lot. Both teams breaking in new quarterbacks. If that's the case, I feel like Minnesota does have an advantage. However, despite that, I'm going to pick the Tar Heels to win 37-21 in this, or 27, sorry, 31-27 in this season opener, despite being on the road and possibly outmanned in the trenches against Minnesota. That has been another episode of Talkin Tar Heels. If you like this video, drop a like, subscribe to the channel, drop a comment, tell me what I'm doing, what I could do better. And I will see you guys next time.